I know a lot of you are familiar with I have a survey that went out to staff, to ECFE staff, that was mostly open-ended questions, and my wonderful students are working with me this summer to analyze that data. I have some of the quantitative data that's pretty quick to do, and that was mostly on the types of technologies that people were using and the value that they found for the different types of technologies. So I have no agenda, I have no plan for our meetings, right? But just as a participant in the meeting, and what any small things that I can offer is I do plan over the summer as I have results from that survey. And then we also have some surveys that went out to parents in 4, I think, school districts. And those are primarily quantitative and pretty quick to analyze. And I have some preliminary results that I do want to let you guys know about today. But anyway, so through the summer, you know, as I have some stuff to share, I will do that. Does anybody, we'll do some quick introductions, but does anybody have any questions about, for those of you who are new joining us, any questions about what we do here or anything like that? Jen or Jennifer? You're all good? All right, wonderful. So let's do some quick introductions. Again, I'm Susan Walker. I'm from the University of Minnesota. My role here is not from the University of Minnesota. It's just as an interested listener who is on Friends of Family Education and could see people posting questions to each other. And I thought, sounds like these professionals could use this space to talk. So that's all I did, was to open up a Zoom room for conversation. I also do, all of my research work is about technology integration in parent education. And so with this sudden adaptation, it's also very, very interesting to me, obviously. And then any ways that I can support you all with information or anything like that. So that's who I am. Who else would like to share who you are, what district you're in, what your role is, what you're interested in coming here today to do?
I can share. So I am Jen Jaros. I am from Duluth Public Schools. I coordinate ECFE. So I am really here to learn from all of you and to just kind of like someone else, I think somebody said, just learn from others about how you're thinking about programming into the future, and what worked well and what didn't work well. And we're in the process of hiring a parent educator, and we have how many a handful of parent educators, full-time, part-time, and we're hiring somebody, and we're just kind of like, is that a smart thing to, we don't even know we do know what we're doing, but we just can't predict the future and what programming is going to look like. And so we're just telling her that, or this person that we had a conversation with, that we're just living in the world of flexibility, and that we are hoping to be able to offer programs as usual, but we don't know. And she's been working in this realm already, so she gets it and she understands, and her technology skills are good. So we didn't want to pass up an opportunity to nab somebody who's really great. So hopefully she joins our team, and we'll see. But it's exciting, and it's scary, and it's I worry about our staff, and I worry about our families, and I just know that we all want to continue to reach out to the families that we know need us. So that's where we're at.
Thanks, Jen. Jen, one thing I'll ask, and then Jen Wenner too, in the chat, if you would put in your email address, because I do have this sort of a running Excel spreadsheet with emails, and then so for those folks who are not on Friends of Family Education, and again, for people like Shelley and others that just heard about this 2 minutes ago. Anyway, so if you would share your email address, I'll make sure that you get added to our little list. Okay, thanks.
I'll do that. And I'll be right back. I have to go help a kid with something.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, who else would like to share who you are and why you're here?
I can share. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. I'm Sarah Hardy, and I work for Edina in the Twin Cities here. And I'm one of 5 parent educators on our team, and living with a lot of uncertainty about the fall. But am enrolled in some summer PD that the district is offering to reflect on lessons learned from the spring, which is great, like sort of system-wide. And our district media and technology guys are absolutely great and have framed up a class for us teachers in Schoology, which is our learning management system, to be thinking about, gosh, what was that like, and what did we learn, and what would we like to apply to the fall. And so I've appreciated that. And I really value this community that Susan's created here. I am on the Facebook group too, but this is just the synchronous opportunity to connect has been awesome. And I will also say I love watching the recordings as well, just for the ones that I miss. I'm pretty faithful. I think I'm current. Yeah, so a lot of uncertainty. Our district right now is holding huge planning sessions. I have a friend who's a principal at an elementary level. And so I know that they're in the weeds on planning for different scenarios in the fall. And our school, the Early Learning Center, has very, very scant representation in those meetings, which is something I noticed. So that's me.
Thanks, Sarah. Naomi, I'll just start calling
You
on.
can go next. Yeah, I was just going to volunteer. I'm Naomi Huso. I'm one of 3 parent educators with Wayzata. And we are very uncertain about the fall, but hopeful. I'm super excited though, because we just rolled out our summer, we call it activity guide versus a catalog. I am on, not only do I teach typical ECFE classes in the school, but I'm also the parent educator on our outreach team. And so I've, for my 3 years with Wayzata, I've been working with 2 other people, our early childhood intervention specialist and our parent liaison. And together we've kind of explore different outreach opportunities. And so this summer, the district gave us the go ahead to try out a lot of different new things and come up with ways to connect with families. We had a lot of feedback in the spring that parents weren't done. They still needed that connection time. And so, yeah, we're going to get started with that. We're doing all distance learning from an outreach perspective, just because some of our staff members just are not comfortable going out and being face-to-face, even with the current guidelines. We do have another group of teachers, a team of 2, that are going to do an in-park distance play thing in July, which is separate from what we're doing. But I'm really excited to see kind of who signs up and how it goes. It sounds like from yesterday, we at least had a few that were interested. And then we're continuing to market that out. So hopefully just to learn more about what this looks like, at least from a distance perspective.
Naomi, as you were talking, I was thinking maybe we'll get t-shirts. It'll be like #uncertain but excited, uncertain but hopeful.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Okay, who else? Jennifer, are you back? I saw you just put your...
Yeah, I am back, but now I got to close my door.
Okay.
Sorry. We have a very active household right now because my oldest teenagers are, they teach at a day camp, and they learned a week or so ago, it's all online. So they are holding a virtual day camp from my kitchen and teaching like little ones cooking classes. So it's great. I'm excited for them, but it means that we've got a lot of buzz in my house. I am just finishing my first year in parent education at Minnetonka ECFE. And we finished out the school year doing distance learning for the kids and parents, and all of our summer programming was canceled, and fall is a question mark. Hashtag uncertain but hopeful. So.
And since you've just joined us, Jen, do you have particular things that you're hoping to get out of this group or our meetings?
You know, I guess the kind of supports from others, especially from people who have been in it longer than me. I just finished my license last year, and so this was my first year in the classroom, and as you can imagine, not the way I expected to end the year. But also, you know, like many of you, hearing from our parents and families that they still really need, you know, maybe even more than ever, need the support, the connection, that they're feeling really isolated. And so trying to figure out, okay, even given, you know, all the circumstances, you know, of the world and the logistics of the district and finances and et cetera, like what things can we do to really still provide kind of that high quality connection to parents and their kiddos.
Yep. Great, thanks. Yeah, and how I think a big question in a lot of people's minds is how will things be different? Right, and what I always like to see situations like this from the excited or the uncertain but hopeful is part of the hopefulness is sort of a hopefulness for innovation, for finding ways to do things differently because we're kind of forced to, and then we go, oh, actually that worked well. Like, how about we keep that part, but then we come back and do this. So yeah, it's an uncertain but hopeful time. Thank you, Naomi. This is going to be big. Shelley, can I ask you to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Shelley Doran. I'm a parent educator with District 196, Apple Valley Rosemount. I teach 9 ECFE classes, and then I support 4 preschool classes. And then I'm curious, Naomi, to hear how your outreach goes, because part of my job is I'm at a shelter in Eagan every Monday, and which I haven't been able to go to since this all shut down. And knowing that, you know, those families, they so needed it before, I can't imagine what's going on now, because we've really had, you know, I've just had email contact with some people that work there. So I would love to gain some ideas on how to, you know, find ways to meet those families' needs in this kind of uncertain time. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit about that. But I'm on a couple of planning committees for fall, and it's the same thing everybody's saying, it's so uncertain. I just got off a meeting a half hour ago about our bridge to school kindergarten transition that is usually held in person, which is now not going to happen. So we're trying to figure out a way to help families transition to kindergarten, whatever that may look like. So, you know, I'm just kind of interested in hearing everybody's perspective and getting ideas from people that, like you say, what worked or what will work and what won't work. I think we learned a lot from spring. I know that there are things I'll do differently if we're on all distance learning as a teacher. So just learning from other people, and that's kind of why I'm here. So
I'll jump in.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
Christy. I'm also from Rosemount, Apple Valley, Eagan. And in your little spiel about recording it, I suddenly started to think, like Shelley, did our boss watch the recordings and go, oh, that's what we're doing? So my disclaimer is I do not speak for my district. I only speak for myself. How's that?
exactly.
Anyway, I really appreciated being involved with these and hearing so many perspectives, because I think, you know, we're in a large metropolitan program, and it's so different to hear from all different kinds of programs with different sizes and different resources, and to really widen my thinking around what families need and what's going on out there.
And Shelley and Christy, I want to tell you that I connected last night with Lisa Herbs,
Mm-hmm.
and for a friend, and it was just lovely. And I didn't know, I don't know where our students go unless I have this kind of opportunity. So I apologize to Lisa that I didn't know where she went after graduation. And she said she was at Rosemount and Apple Valley and Egan, and it was just like, I know the folks in 196. So, and she probably gushes anyway, and you already know this, but she absolutely loves and feels like she has found her professional home. So
That's wonderful.
yeah,
We love her too.
We do.
she's great. Miss Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Canese. I'm from St. Paul, ECFE. I'm an early childhood teacher, lead teacher, not a parent educator, but I really appreciate being able to sit in with you, getting so many ideas. I got so many ideas the last time I sat in. I've already written down play dates in the park, things like that. So just hearing what other people are doing to problem solve, it's just so important. We don't get enough of that. So thank you.
Wonderful. And Sharon, I'm really glad that you're here too, and from the early childhood perspective, because one of the things that I'm starting to pick up from looking at parent surveys about what went, I mean, one of the questions we put to parents is, compared to your traditional ECFE experience, like, and I think we had like 3 or 4 different things, like major components of ECFE, but it was like, was this as good as, not as good as, or better than like your traditional experience? And again, this is incredibly preliminary, but it probably won't make, it makes complete sense to me that when it comes to communication with the teachers and information about my ECFE program, like what time do things happen, and are schools going to be closed, and is there a plant sale and stuff like that, information about the program, parents are like, it's as good. Like doing stuff online, it's as good. And if you think about the internet as like a delivery mechanism for information, right? I mean, the original stuff we did before we had two-way communication was web pages. So that works. And then then the kind of the middle ground is on parent discussion, like doing the Zoom sessions to keep parent discussion in that. And, and I'm kind of initially seeing I mean, it was not bad. I mean, I really appreciate the teachers trying, that kind of thing. But man, when it comes to those little kids and to their connections with the teachers and their connections to other children, you probably won't be surprised that what I'm hearing from parents is like 70-80% of them are in the not as good as, and I am reluctant to share that because it's just like, well, great, Susan, what are we supposed to do about that, right? But it's the reality, I think, of ECFE, of what it offers, because one of the wonderful things is it's not, quote unquote, just a parent ed program, right? And it also isn't, quote unquote, just early childhood education, right? It blends together. And so it would make sense, though, that not everything is going to go well, but some things do, right? Some things do go well online. So I especially am happy that, Sharon, you're here representing part of the early childhood community, because I think probably going forward, that piece is going to be a challenge.
Right. I also will say I'm not speaking for the entire Minnesota early childhood contingency. I'm happy to be here.
Get closer to the microphone. Yeah.
I know one thing we did from the early childhood teacher perspective is they stayed, like we did Zoom meetings for all of our parent ed classes, and the early childhood teacher would do a group time initially and then stay on the meeting with the parents. And the parents really valued having that teacher on. And that was a great thing to have an early childhood teacher in our meetings as well.
Yep.
always had lots to add, and parents really value that perspective as well, I feel like.
Yep. Yeah. And, and I think, and I've seen a lot of teachers post like YouTube videos of themselves reading a book or some way that they're continuing to engage with the children, right? And here's, teacher Emily, reaching out to kids or posting things on their birthdays and things like that. So, and I think parents and the children like really, really appreciated that too. Oh, and there's Karen. Let's just bring everybody from when does anybody have a question that you'd like to bring to the group? I have a general question that I think everybody can weigh in on, but I don't want to hog the time. I mean, it's not for me, it really is for you, but but I want this for you guys. Does anybody have a specific question you'd like to ask others? Support, resources, ideas?
Kelly, one idea for you. So we had one of our preschool teachers who, it's a program that we're not continuing for complete separate reasons, but we called it block time, and it was a 2 to 4-year-old, 2 to 5-year-old classroom where each day was a different group of students. So a preschool classroom. But what that teacher did when she went online was she created these, like, she called them play dates, where it was like a 15-minute, like she had a Sign Up Genius 15-minute segments, and individual families, and the whole family was invited to join, but it was 15 minutes where you just got one-on-one time with her as a teacher. And so parents were able to either have 15 minutes to take a breath, and their kids read a book and did songs and did different story times and different activities, or it could be time for the parent to connect, but that might be something for those families where you just can have that one-on-one connection with them. And I don't know if they have technology.
Yeah, there is a small computer room there, and I did suggest that, but I think, as we all know, we were all kind of flying by the seat of our pants for a while. So I am hoping to set something like that up for the fall. And mainly my role was with the adults, one-on-one with parents. But that might be a good suggestion to pull kids into it as well. And
and even if you made it more of a parent piece too, where it's just like, I'm here from this,
right.
time, or if more even just, that's one of the things in our summer stuff where it's, they can either just connect with the parent educator on their own time and ask a question, but we are offering those, I think we're doing 20-minute segments where you can just have that time. And they set up the time based on the Sign Up Genius. So, they get to decide when it works for them.
So I'll chime in. I tried doing like coffee house office hours where I was just available like in a chat room, in a Zoom call. We use Google Meet for an hour, a couple of times a week, and welcomed anyone to join, and they didn't have to sign up. I don't think I'll do that again. I think I might convert to something like what you're talking about, because I couldn't guarantee privacy for people who needed it.
Right.
And the people who ended up using it had like big stuff that they wanted to share, and so I couldn't protect their privacy because I had publicized the information to everybody. I never had anybody else join and like intrude, so to speak, even though everyone was theoretically welcome. But it was meant to serve a function around just a quick check-in, like, hey, how you doing? Like a lighter water cooler talk, coffee house talk. But it ended up being one-to-one parent coaching. And so I think I'm just going to call it what it is for next year. So if anyone is noodling those kinds of options, I'm not going to continue the free-for-all hour of availability. It's going to have to be more structured, I think, for me. Like what you're talking about, Naomi.
Yeah, I like the Sign Up Genius idea.
Yeah, my coordinator and I went back and forth, kind of like what you had suggested, Sarah. It's like, do we have just an open Zoom call? Do we do one-on-one meets? And I think in the end, the privacy piece and just am I going to be paid to sit in a chat room that no one decides to enter because it's summer? I think she was a little like, is that really the best use of your time? Maybe not.
Yeah, I took the idea from our youth director who was doing that for youth, just like as a hangout. And I thought it seemed like a great opportunity for parents seeking just connection with other parents, but that's not what they were using the time for. So, and I did other things while I was sitting there alone in the call, right? So it wasn't like I was not using that time for school, but it didn't end up working out the way I'd hoped.
I was wondering about the opposite too, that if there are people who want to connect week to week, like could you blend that? Like could you still have a sign up for a group, but then you would know ahead of time what you were dealing with, you know?
Or maybe both models have their place.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Need both.
Hey, Susan, I have a question for the group, and it's a smaller group today, so I don't know, but I just am curious based on my own understanding in our district of how the planning for the fall in Edina, at least currently, isn't involving early learning center stakeholders. It's only involving our coordinator and her counterpart in ECSE. It sounds to me like, Shelley, you guys are actively planning and involved at the table and talking about how the fall is going to look for early childhood. Can I take a survey for everybody else? Like, are you at the table, or are you just waiting to be notified what's going to happen?
I think Wayzata is pretty similar to Edina in the sense of the coordinator, both for early learning and for special education, are the ones at the table having those conversations, and then they report back to us what's being decided.
In St. Paul, we're not at the table at this point.
Okay.
We don't really know what the planning structure might even be later on in the summer. But I think the other question is, how does that compare to other years? Were you at the table last year versus this year? That's the question that I'd like to see answered. Because if we were last year, why aren't we this year? Or that's my question.
I'll just respond to that quickly. I was definitely at the table for the planning of the parent ed, adult ed catalog in November, December, January, that was released in February, if everything was going to happen without COVID. So, and now we are not.
So, and Sharon, is that your experience? So, I mean, is that what has, do you see a change?
Yes, we'd have our brochure planned, our catalog presented before we leave school the beginning of June, and the families would have a pretty good picture. They'd already be mulling over which day they're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is different as far as staff contributing, or even a timeline is very different.
Right. Yeah, and I'll just, and I'm not in community yet, but my sense generally, I mean, isn't it even that there's some announcement later by MDE that's coming in the next week or two about, because right now it's still like I was in the car yesterday, I had NPR on, they were saying, and school districts are still like plan A or plan B or plan C, you know? And at the university, like they're just starting to shape what the fall will look like. So I'm just getting a sense that there's a whole lot of uncertainty in decision making that's going on at higher levels. Yeah.
But are they hopeful?
Yeah, exactly.
Good question. I heard that July 31st is a decision. So a decision has to be made by July 31st.
And I heard that a guidance document was coming out from MDE the week of July 27th.
Okay.
So the Friday of that week is the 31st.
That's
so it. Yeah.
And I think, Sarah, to answer yes, we do have committees for different parts of our program that are doing planning. And my understanding is, you know, our coordinator wants us to come up with options so that when we know what's happening, we have stuff in place that we can say, here, we have these ideas and let's put this in place. So it's not like we're out there making the decisions about
Right.
what's going to happen, but we are planning for the different scenarios so that when we do get that answer, hopefully we have enough information that we can run our program and you know, do our jobs. I don't know,
I was
Karen, or
gonna
Chris, you might say differently, but
Well, I was going to say we're at a table. I don't know which
exactly,
table it is.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's kind of
Yeah.
how I see it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we give feedback so that our director takes that feedback and takes it to the next level.
Exactly.
So that's what our work is. I
Yeah.
don't think we're decision makers.
Mm-mm.
I think we're just
No.
like heads up on this or this.
But
Right,
I
I would
like
not,
to listen to
I'm
us.
hoping for a table like Shelley and Christy, like I'm hoping, I
Yeah.
would love to be at that. And I actually called my coordinator after getting current on all of these past COPs with Susan and said, oh my gosh, I have this list of ideas. I really want to re-envision ECFE as needed. And I'd love to be at the table for brainstorming that and supporting that process. And I don't think there's a table. So if there is, I'm not at it.
Well, is it something you could create? Is it something you could step in and step up and say,
Bit of a
I would like-
rebel.
yeah. I mean, what rules are we following here?
Exactly.
I missed
Rock
the
the
rules.
boat. Rock the
I
boat.
have pitched a summer class in the meantime about talking with children about race and skin color.
Okay, we'll talk.
So,
And I would say, you know, just even in my experience, so my scenario is I have an undergraduate class. I traditionally teach it in a face-to-face classroom, and they've been dancing around with what they're going to do. Well, they just released that they're, you know, so I was told my class is going to be online, and that's always been one of the scenarios. And I've been very vocal that I hate that idea. Nevertheless, so I have to adapt, right? And so I have been thinking about it. And when I think about, again, reflecting on the spring and the changes that I made in the spring so that it was completely online, what my preferences would be. And so what I asked was, I can do most of the course online, but I would like 5 to 8 sessions face-to-face, because we do things together as a group where I do debates with the students. You know, we do a deliberation on what age should children be to get cell phones, right? And it's a wonderful thing because we talk about responsibility and young children and stuff like that. And the kinds of things I know as a teacher go much better in a face-to-face environment than they do online. Does it mean I can't do it? Absolutely no. I'm a pro. I can do this, right? But I also have preferences. And so I pushed back on the completely online. I said, because I also understand that the university has CDC guidelines they need to follow in terms of social distancing. And that also means that if I have 48 students in a class, the best that they can do is going to be put me in some Coliseum type classroom that may start to defeat my purpose for interaction. So I just said, can I do, you know, like even 5 sessions face to face, or I would like to. I don't even ask questions more. It's just like, I want to do 5, you know. And they said, well, actually the limit is 30. So they've made some determination about the number of students that could be in a classroom based on like number 30. And so anyway, this is just saying, so my thing is, I need to hear from administration what the guidelines that they have to follow, because they're making decisions about janitorial time and paying electric bills and all of that stuff I don't have to worry about, right? But I do want from them the clear guidelines, because then my expertise as a teacher kicks in to then start thinking more creatively about how do I do what I know is best for my learners and for my own health, right? But especially for my learners, so that I'm not doing a whole, like I'm just thinking creatively. Because one thing I've learned from a lot of administrators, and yes, I know this is being recorded and that's perfectly fine, is a lot of administrators are so stressed with so many decisions that it's very hard for them to think creatively. And so I figure within my little domain of how I teach and who I teach and what I teach and my ethic around especially social connectedness and especially around building social capital and relationships between my students and between my students and me, that then that's my job to figure out how can I do that. And so their job as administrators, you give me very clear guidelines because you have all those bigger things you have to worry about and you're being paid 3 times as much. But for me to feel successful in my work, right, then I want to be creative, and I'm going to push the envelope as much as I can to honor my craft, you know, with my students, and then find and not for today, but at another time, I do have questions for this group more about relationship building and that kind of thing through online. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. But I see this kind of difference between our role as educators and kind of the demand that I would have of an administrator of just be clear. Like, as soon as you know, involve me in the conversation, but be clear, because then I'll know what my restrictions are, and then I can be creative within those restrictions.
Unfortunately, we're finding ourselves having to be creative before we know those restrictions. That's our situation. Do you guys think so? Because I want to have something to say to them and present to them when these guidelines come out, and I can say, okay, here's what we're thinking, and given these guidelines, we can either do it or we can't, or here's what we have to tweak. Like, I mean, I've just learned over too many decades, there is nobody thinking about this business for us except us. Mm-hmm. But lately I have can I put out a scenario for this group to poke holes in? And by the way, it's just Christy sitting in her house, remember? So I've started thinking about the Captain Kangaroo, Fred Rogers model. Just thinking as a kid, and that ages me, I know. How we used to watch Captain Kangaroo all the time, and you felt like you were in the captain's house, and Mr. Green Jeans was there, and you waited for Mr. Moose, and it felt like a place to belong, sort of, right? I think the difference we could make in the fall is to have our teachers in their classrooms, going through their routines virtually, and possibly even having a buddy system where families sign up. You have 2 families at a time with the teacher in her environment where and we could even send home materials for activities. So remember how Captain Kangaroo would do his little project with an oatmeal box, and you'd be like, where's my oatmeal box, right? Like, it would be, so they would have that activity, and we could focus on that parent-child piece so that they would be doing it together, at that time. We're not just putting it out on Seesaw because they don't look at it. They don't do it, right? And then you start to feel part of Miss Shelley's classroom, or, and then they could sign up to rotate through. And if they had a buddy, then they could also figure out outside of class how to connect and how to be at the park together and have that social interaction with just 2 families. Like, I think you can't social distance with more than 2 families. That's just what I've come to. But then it has that classroom structure, and kids start to think of it as their school. And then I was thinking, if we started classes 2 weeks later than usual, we could bring them all in one at a time to meet teachers in person and know that's my teacher. You know how quickly kids pick up on that? Like, that's my teacher. And we would offer, I think we'd have to offer fewer classes because we just couldn't physically do all of that. But so, and that's my latest rendition of how we might incorporate social relationships.
I love it.
What do you guys think?
Well, of course, it also, like, I'm in your age group. So I'll go even further, but so of course I'm starting to think TV, like, And so the one thing, because you want holes to be poked into it, because people will say, oh, you're asking children to watch TV, right? And of
Yeah.
course, that's not true, because then
Right.
we're capitalizing on the interactivity of
Right.
the internet. Yeah.
And I wouldn't call, it's a Captain Kangaroo thing for me only. Like, but think about how Fred Rogers made kids feel like part of their, and if you even added in personal interactions, like it was what inspired my idea, but thank you for that. Right. Like, can I get that when I'm watching Sesame Street, or can I get that when I'm, that's a good point.
But because it's not an all or not. I mean, there are dimensions of that, Christy, that we do know, because when I was working with, my thing with like creating Parentopia was to replicate the ECFE experience. It wasn't just to have a platform for sharing information, right? And part of that replication of the ECFE experience is sight and sound and images and families and that kind of thing, right? And the structure, so that familiarity of who are the families or who are the teachers that I see, what are the colors? If I went to an ECFE classroom, what colors would I see, right? They wouldn't see somebody's house. They would see
Right.
reds and yellows and
Right.
blues and green, and so there are, and so as you're talking too, and I'm remembering like, Romper Room and, Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and Captain Kangaroo with Bunny Rabbit, and yeah, I'll just keep going, is that as a child, what do you get? You get familiarity in a space, right? You get the constancy or the consistency of a time. So this was back in the day of scheduled TV. So
Yep.
This was not on demand, right? It was 9 o'clock on Saturday or on Monday or weekday mornings.
Yeah.
You would tune into, while I'm not advocating that, again, it's a piece of consistency. So there are elements of children's television.
Yes.
And that, why did children gravitate to these kindly white men who are a little bit older, and they were gentle and they were kind and, and stuff like that. And then with their characters, with their puppets, right? And Sesame Street builds on this too. And so I think that the criticism about the one way is appropriate, but there are plenty of elements of why children's television and good children's television. And when we think about the elements of Sesame Street as good children's television, for instance, and there is so much research about Sesame Street, right? That I hear in your idea. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, and then the other piece is that there would be kids on the smart board or on your computer as part of the meeting. And so you'd have your whole class at the same time. They just all wouldn't be in the classroom at the same time. And then I envisioned the parent meeting being on Zoom. And I don't know how that whole structure would go, but I think you could structure that so kids learn a routine just like they learn a routine in the classroom. And Susan, I have to tell you, I'll show you this, that I bought your, so when I'm hearing you talk, like this has some good stuff in it. But creating that community virtually so that kids feel part of it, because right now it's just this strange lady reading a book. They're not invested. They're not hooked in. They're not. And in the fall, we'll only have more new families.
Yep.
I will extend that idea a little bit, Christy, because I think parents and children were willing to stick with us because we already had a relationship.
Exactly.
Starting brand new families, this is not going to be serving them well because we won't be able to make connection. But as early childhood, what I was starting to do is taking a little bit, even though I wasn't able to articulate it the way you just did, is invite the children into, my cat would come across the screen and toys that I found in the basement. you know, I could say, here, I found this and bring it into the screen. And then I did show making interaction activities, and I figured out a way to like bring it down so you could see my hands down there. So kind of a little bit of that without really knowing I was recreating that, and had a little thing in the back, so it wasn't my living room. But doing more of that, maybe taking it and saying, here, let me show you my kitchen. Let me show you this or that, is inviting the children into the world instead of it just being two-dimensional. And I like the idea of being able to get back into the classroom as opposed to inviting them into my home. But I like that because the children did respond to that. And they would look around and say, oh, look, see what she has over her shoulder. Look, 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 look. Because I had invited them to I Spy and things like that with me.
So kind of just what's going through my head, and I love the idea of getting back in the classroom and that piece of it. I'm curious how your districts handled the stay-at-home order and how that all worked out. I know I've heard across many districts that everybody kind of handled it differently. I think because of the volume of our district and just how large we are, it was a lot easier for everybody to just say, no one's allowed in the building unless you have special permission, because again, kind of what Susan had said, the janitorial, just all of the pieces that we don't think about were happening. And so hopefully if that idea could come to life, we could get in the classroom. But I love the idea of being able to bring the kids in and build that relationship. And I talked about that teacher that did the one-on-one classes, but another thing she did was like when she read her books and did her recorded story time, she read in one of the ones she sent me, The Hungry Caterpillar. And then after she was done reading the book, she played a game where she's like, I'm gonna hold up a color and you're gonna find something in your house that's this color. So this idea of bringing them in, like, but just kind of thinking from the administrative piece, like hopefully we can get back into the rooms, even if we can't get all of our families back into the rooms.
Christy, I love your idea. It's similar to one I've been noodling with slightly larger number of people, like maybe 4 dyads coming. Depending on the numbers, again, we need to know, as Susan says, I need to know the parameters, and then we can go from there with our creativity. But the other advantage I see to getting, at least doing a rotating, physically attending school, like you're talking about, is it's eyes on both the kids and the parents in terms of assessing and really truly checking in with people. And for the parents too, just to nourish their need for connection and to be seen and to have an opportunity to feel supported, you know, wholly in that school space. So I see it, and of course we know what's good for parents has, you know, gains for kids too, is good for kids too. So it's good for kids, good for parents, therefore it's better for kids. And I think the parent ed it could be structured just like an ECFE class where you split off after a time, and the adults who are not early childhood teachers on that team can go to a different room and then dial in a Zoom call with everybody else. And then the parents who are physically present, say with me, could be in my room, or they could be on, you know, devices or whatever. And then everyone else could join and we could have some private parenting time as well. I really am hopeful, uncertain but hopeful, that we can do something like that. And I will say, to Naomi's point and Karen's, like, I've heard from my coordinator that she's thinking that our building might even be taken over for kindergarten because of the need to spread out.
You've heard that too, Sharon?
Yeah, that's a fear that has been fueled by rumors, but again, we don't know what we don't know just yet.
Going back to Christy's model, I love it because I grew up with Romper Room and I remember Miss Karen, and so I just think it's a natural. No, never mind. But what came to my perception this weekend, I was with family in Wisconsin, and my niece had shared that her son is just dying to play across the street with his best friend across the street. but his best friend's family isn't as private about, or isn't as conservative about their social distancing, and my niece's family is. I mean, there's medical issues that say they have to, and so when I think about buddying the kids, I think kids have to have buddies. I want to make that happen. And yet I also think it's not just this family and this family, it's this family and then who they're connected to that's going to make a difference. And I don't know how to navigate that, but that's just something that for me is on the table.
Yeah. Right. And those are the guidelines we're missing, right? We don't know what we'll be allowed to do. And we also don't know what people will be comfortable doing.
Right. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I mean, my experience with these, I mean, is it possible within a class that there's already, say, 4 or 6 kids that are buddied? Like that they already have connections with somebody else? And I mean, I know there's a whole lot of them who don't, right? And then one of the great things is that they find new families or they find experience and that kind of thing. But I'm just thinking to lessen the sense of responsibility about all of the guidelines around finding a buddy, right? Is if Jennifer and I are friends and we're coming to ECFE and our kids are already getting together anyway, like our kids are already the buddies.
So like a volunteering, we will take that 10 a.m. slot.
Yeah, I envision us using our conference sign-up system that we already have in place, so that people, you just put out the slots and then people decide which days they want to come. And there's all that behind the scenes talking already about which class are you going to sign up for? Let's be in the same class, right? So I envision that kind of taking care of itself, and also supporting people in, yep, you're not in with this person, but look who you get to meet. And that's what we do, right, is foster those relationships among people who don't know each other. So and that's why I was thinking 2 families, and that if you had 10 families across X number of weeks, you could get in there 2 to 3 times, whatever the math works out to be, whatever we have to do. Or I don't know those details, but I'm just really reaching for ways that we meet families in person, even at a physical distance. And then we could even do if they can't come into the building, we go to their driveway, or we go to their apartment complex parking lot, or we go to and that means we can't serve as many people as we previously have. But my guess is we won't be serving as many people anyway. Like we aren't going to get the numbers that we had last year. So
Christy, one thing that as you're talking is, what I'm envisioning is, again, not one strategy, like not one format, but is sort of identifying what are our goals, right? And so one of them is, anyway, and then the multiple strategies. And so like if I think about the meeting like having a potluck at the beginning of the school year that is at a park, so that is like social distancing, it's face to face, it's outside or whatever, like that could be one way of. And there is also research for online teaching that you have like a required face-to-face meeting with students at the beginning of the semester, so that then they get to know you as the instructor, they can ask questions, and then they disperse. So, it makes sense. But maybe that's one strategy for the meeting people, and then the wonderful idea of Captain Kangaroo with kids, and then having a Zoom session for parents. So that is maybe the heart of the weekly teaching. And then if we think about the buddy system, so then that helps kids socialization and sort of time outside and reinforcing family togetherness. And then if there's that objective about sort of cultural diversity, because one of the things that we thought about with Parentopia was again, that idea of when parents come together for pizza night, or they come together for that once a year thing, or the plant sale, that's an all-site event that families are seeing. So that if I go to the Thursday morning class and you go to the Tuesday morning class, I'll never meet you, right? But if there's an event where we can have that connection. And so, and families have said that they do really like hearing and seeing the posts from families who are in other, especially Spanish speaking families, or, you know, and so, because, or like one parent told us that that she really enjoyed hearing from a parent who had a special needs child, you know, and that really helped her gain more empathy and understanding about families with special needs. The kind of ways that if that parent, since she's not in her class, she would never get that, right? So maybe there's also another outcome or another objective for how do we help bridge some of the cultural differences of families that we traditionally could do in a face-to-face way? How can we do that online, right? And so all I'm saying is, I think that as we're talking, it's also good for us to be thinking, what are all the different kinds of things that we want to do with our programs, and then find different things to help meet that, and not feel defeated if one thing that we do, if the potluck at the beginning of the semester, or the Mr. Rogers Captain Kangaroo, that meets some needs and a lot of wonderful needs, but maybe not everything, right? Is then having that menu of, and that's the wonderful thing with technology, is then you can kind of pick and choose and go, this is what technology does really well. This, it sucks. You cannot get that this way. But then you're trying to do all things, but you're finding multiple ways of doing it in a sort of a natural way. Well, I see that it's 1 o'clock, so we can continue if you want for the next few minutes. Don't want to abort this wonderful discussion. This is fabulous, by the way. This is, I feel like, and I'm not even in ECFE, and I'm really excited. So what final things would you like the group to do, or questions to bring up, so that you don't leave here feeling unsatisfied or frustrated? Or
I guess kind of a final thought to what you had said, Susan, was I think that idea of presenting kind of a menu of different options to families is something that we tried to do for our summer stuff. We have some options where, excuse me, parents are just going to get an email with different activity ideas. They've signed up for it. They're choosing to be a part of this, but they're going to get interactive activities a couple times a week for them to do with their kids alone. We're also looking at, how do we serve just parent groups? If it's just parents that want to be connected and they feel like the component for their children is not valid in this way, but they need other adults, we have that options for them. And then we did try out a couple ECFE classes with our toddlers and preschoolers, just to see if people are still looking for that. But, you know, just kind of testing the waters, and what do people want? What are they looking for? And how do we kind of put enough out there that people are going to gravitate to what they want? And some of our families are just ready to be done for this year, and that's just fine too. They just won't sign up.
I just wanted to add one comment about Christy, your plan. I love that. I love Mr. Rogers. I read things about him every day. But I was just thinking about, you know, you're talking about the buddies, and I'm thinking of families who may not choose to interact that way, and then that's leaving a family kind of by themselves. So I was just thinking about maybe groups of 3, you know, just because it's hard to be that family who wants interaction and they're kind of ghosted, you know, they're just left alone to not have a buddy. So that was all, but I love that idea.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, everybody. I just love writing things down, just lots of good ideas, thinking outside that box. Thank you.
One thing I'd love to hear, if anybody down the road in coming weeks has intel on, is ECFE funding and how secure it is. My coordinator indicated that she heard that there might be some flexibility around those dollars, and I was like, no, no flexibility. And she was actually sounded kind of hopeful that there might be. So I know there's a camp that is feeling really a lot of pressure to attend to core mission of public schools. And I don't know. This is just again a conversation I have with my coordinator, but if anybody knows anything about that, I think we should keep our ears to the ground about it.
Yeah, I think that, and I sort of choose not to be better knowledgeable about this, but in our conversations too, in the spring, it did seem like there were some people that were talking about a shift, and maybe it was Mike Brown in a separate conversation that he was part of, but just that there's something about that coordinators or community ed directors would have some flexibility in their spending of ECFE dollars. And he just kept saying that's not good news for ECFE. So it did not sound unfamiliar.
Okay.
In the, but at the same time, it sounded like it was new, and he was waiting to hear if that was going through. So again, my guess is that the COVID-19 stuff is throwing everybody for a loop, and at the much higher levels in the state too, they're figuring out funding streams. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is great. Again, this is just going to be Tuesdays at noon for the summer. So come back and join us if you'd like. Tell your friends, and I'm just so thrilled. This was a great conversation, and I will be posting this probably within sometime this weekend or this afternoon. So if you have thoughts, you want to share them with me, and then I'll add our new folks to our email distribution. So thank you all.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for
Susan.
supporting us. And Susan, where are the recordings? Are they on the?
They are actually, let me get it. So I have a YouTube link, and let's see, it's a go over here, YouTube, and it's a playlist that I started, just of my videos, and the playlist is, let's see, show more, there we go. Next, nope, oh, here they are, okay. And this, I think this should do it. Okay, I'll put it here in the everyone, okay. There we go, okay. You see that?
Yes, I will grab that link. Let's see if I can.
See if it opens for you.
Yep. Da-da-da. Yep, there it is.
Good, and I have them
Thank
down.
you.
Yeah, the only two I didn't put, we had the last week, we had like 4 or 5 people, a couple people were repeated, and really more of the conversation was about really continuing, like, well, from the spring, should we have these over the summer? And
Sure.
yeah, so those two were the only ones that, they were small enough, they turned out more conversations rather than idea sharing, so.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks a bunch. Have a
Yeah,
good week.
wonderful to see you.
Likewise.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
right.
Bye-bye.